the dream for me, and we're working on this right now, is natural language, like just typing something in or saying something, compiling straight to a series of tasks. What really excites me is competitive free markets for any task on this planet. Like this is anything that people can fulfill, that humans can fulfill, whether it's like buying coffee or what you see today in crypto with like a cross for bridging or Uniswap X for like fulfilling swap orders. Any task that can be fulfilled that is verifiable.
One of the things that I am consistently impressed with and I love out of the Harvard undergrad community is like, there's a violent focus on entrepreneurship. And I don't mean entrepreneurship in like the venture capital raise money sense. Like I think about entrepreneurship in terms of this idea of you are creating a lot more than you should be able to with the resources you have.
Obviously, when you're at a college with as many resources as Harvard, there's so much to do from an extracurricular perspective. It's almost like you chose a path where the extracurricular is not directly associated with Harvard College. And that's very admirable in many ways, but also it's the hard road to do because it's not set up. There's no infrastructure. It's not institutionalized by the school.
Welcome back to another episode of Proof of Coverage. We are blessed to have John Woo back as a co-host today again after that awesome episode with Calidora last week. And then we also have Ash from Axal, who's joining as the guest for this week. Ash just graduated from Harvard College. He had a pretty interesting journey along his time there that he's going to tell you a little bit about today. And he also co-founded a company that, had their previous round led by Andreessen Horowitz and has their current round led by EV3, as well as a couple of other venture investors in the space. But Ash, when we started speaking, one of the first things that I found super interesting about your backstory and everything was that you have a twin brother who's also like a venture superstar in building something absolutely insane. Is that right?
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up. I was actually just talking to him last night. He's out in SF and I'm here in New York. So first time apart in a while, but I feel like that's impacted so much of how I've thought about building, about life, about just competition in general. But I'm sure this is something most people can relate to, just a sibling that you grow up with alongside them. I think having a twin is like that at a different level. It's like, especially when you're little, everything that you're doing is just alongside this other person. One of my earliest memories, I think, is like us arguing about who could like read faster, who could like do division better than the other guy in like kindergarten or something, just sitting in the backseat of our minivan. And I think that's really like informed my relationship with him throughout. We did a competitive policy debate, if anybody's familiar with that, in high school. And I just loved researching and going down rabbit holes. And policy, unlike other types of debate, is 2v2. So you got a partner. And I, for the life of me, just did not want to partner with him. I was like, I'm going to do better. I'm going to go and like win more tournaments and do all this stuff. And we had a great run. And I remember sophomore year, he qualified for this big national tournament that me and my partner had just missed out of after a whole like 9 months of debating. And that was like, damn, like it was a big kind of feeling of like, didn't hit the mark, didn't do as well. So I think competition is extremely healthy in that way of just driving me forward. And then we ended up partnering up senior year, which I think is just a highlight of our career. And we just kind of crushed it, researching random topics, going to nationals. This is right when COVID hit. So unfortunately didn't get to do that in person, but great time. And then, honestly, I think getting into college really like changed the narrative up to, he ended up going to NYU. I went to Harvard. Stayed in touch, both kind of like on the East Coast and super close, but he worked at Amazon and Google. I ended up working at Amazon like the summer after him, just both loved building and just diving into stuff. Funnily enough, both got into startups at around the same time too. I've been in crypto since my freshman year of college when I was just doing unpaid work for an angel, just trying to better learn about the space. This is right after DeFi summer, so stuff was really kicking off. He was much more excited about hardware and physically building stuff. Funnily enough, now he's working on this non-invasive Neuralink kind of startup out in SF. Also signed his term sheet the same day I signed mine about 2 or 3 weeks ago for this bigger kind of round, but super exciting stuff. I'm just glad to have him along the way for the journey.
Have you guys historically been interested in similar ideas? Non-invasive Neuralink seems like a crazy stretch from the crypto world that we're in right now.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a yin and yang kind of thing. Like he's always been a lot more excited about like immediate, like this is something I can build with my hands and see what goes on. And I think there's so much value to that when you think about hardware and like the future of how we think about this stuff. I think the commonality for sure is, and I'm sure we'll dive into this, just making stuff super intuitive and easy for the masses. And whether that's software, whether that's crypto based, whether that's what he's doing on the hardware side, I think this future that we're all envisioning and talking about all the time only works if we can bring everybody along for the ride and really make this stuff accessible. And I think with Axal, that's a lot about just leveraging intents and agents to make things super clear for everyone. And of course, with him, it's just about you literally think something, let's transcribe that, which I think is just so powerful. So some commonalities there.
That's cool. Now, a lot of the twins I know back in the day, even if they got into the same colleges, they purposely chose two different paths and separated themselves. Was that what you guys did on purpose?
That's a good question. I don't think it was like anything intentional. I do think like when we were little, for sure, there was this feeling of like, oh, he's doing this thing, I'm gonna try this like other kind of thing out. And as you can imagine, like with our parents, that was always a pain. I remember I loved swimming, and I remember one car ride where he's just like, oh, I don't want to keep going to practice, and I was like, oh, this is so much fun, I keep doing it. So definitely some trade-offs. I think it definitely emerged that way though when we think about like how our paths have evolved with just very different things. And I think that's so valuable to have somebody that's that close to you that you can just always talk to, who has a different domain expertise. That whenever I call him, I'm learning something brand new about hardware, brand new about like neural interfaces, and vice versa. Crypto has obviously been in and out of vogue for over the past few years, but I think especially now you're seeing a lot more excitement. So
it's interesting though, right? Because I think even though you guys chose different paths after high school and you have different subtle differences in interests, you're both very entrepreneurial. So that's a commonality there for sure. Doing this right out of college or while you're at college, was that hard? And how did you think about it? And what are your other friends doing right now?
Yeah, I feel like, especially when you're early on in this, it's a lot of just exploring. Like I think just put yourself in the shoes of like kid just got into Harvard. They're like psyched about this. You're meeting so many new, cool, talented people all over. And for me, it was just a lot of exploration, and it was very fun. Like my path into crypto in particular was like doing this unpaid kind of research work for this VC, getting really like stoked about just philosophically what this stuff can enable. And then gunning into the hackathon scene and just doing a lot of like random side projects, building with my friends, etc. So everything was like all nice and fun then. And I think when things kind of got real was when we built out the sort of original version of Axal, which was like a automated treasury management platform. And we pitched that idea to A16Z Crypto right when they were running their crypto startup school Accelerator in Santa Monica, and lucky enough to get into that. And I think that was the real turning point of like, this is not just a cool thing that we built. This is something that other people like a lot. And even our hackathon sponsors at the time were like, we're paying too much for Fireblocks, for an Anchorage. We'd love to use something that's a bit more accessible and kind of cheap, like what you guys are doing. So I think that was a clear turning point, and it was very, very difficult, I'd say, for the first 6 months. It's number one, just deciding what this company looks like going forward, incorporating, getting set up with everything. And then the bigger decision for us was like, we got to go live in LA for the next 4 months. This is like February until June, moving cross country, all of our friends and networks back in Boston and Cambridge, just like leaving them to go and work on this thing. Definitely some tension early on. And I think I like to see myself as somebody that can cooperate with a lot of folks. I feel like I'm pretty flexible and interact with so many different groups, but two of my best friends that I was doing this with very quickly realized that startups maybe aren't right for them. And we weren't sort of the best group. I remember one instance for one guy who I definitely still on good terms with him today, but very difficult time. We were all just cooking in the house, like trying to make dinner one night, and he was just flat out like refusing to help out. And that to me was just like, man, this thing's getting pretty intense. There's a lot of crossover between like work and life. Who knows exactly where this is going to go? So definitely a low point. I remember there was a flight back to Boston after the accelerator was done, just sitting on the plane and just reflecting on all this and just kind of thinking like, okay, these guys are moving on. I'm doing this, still trying to stay committed to Axal and see what we can do. Do I still have my heart in this? Do I believe in this?
That's a good thing to find out though. When as anyone knows, if you know that there's a disconnect between you and your partners, founders, whatever, let's figure it out early, not later. That's so much better. Especially while, you're young. I mean, seems like a lot of your free time, your extracurricular was done towards entrepreneurial ventures and research into the subjects you like. Obviously, when you're at a college with as many resources as Harvard, there's so much to do from an extracurricular perspective. It's almost like you chose a path where the extracurricular is not directly associated with Harvard College. And that's very admirable in many ways, but also it's the hard road to do because it's not set up. There's no infrastructure. It's not institutionalized by the school. So when you were looking for money, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. So the accelerator, the A16Z thing was, we weren't really looking for money. It was like, we knew some folks, we were talking to them and kind of went down that process and got into the accelerator, obviously didn't do a bigger round around it like a lot of people do. And my mentality was always like, I'm not going to pay myself until I graduate. Like I have every resource that I need. I'm fully covered. Let's just see what we can do. So that went mostly untouched. And then the journey for Axal after the accelerator kind of led to the state that we are in right now. And I'm happy to dive into that in a lot more detail. But I think it's just a lot of leveraging your network and just hustling. Like I grew up kind of like a shy kid, like not the type of guy to like actively go out and like talk to some guy who I maybe met once and see what we can do. And I think fundraising is the total opposite. Like you need to put yourself out there. You have to go to events. I think Mahesh randomly pinged me, or I pinged him like must have been like October or something of like my senior year, just super random. Hadn't spoken to him at all. And then just quickly got coffee with him one day a couple months ago at HBS. So everything kind of ended up being a great connection from there.
That's cool. So before we get into Axal, I think it's a very good point. We're talking about the accelerator, and help me out because, A16 also was an early investor in Novel Labs, and they've asked me to be either, participate as a mentor or judge or something, an advisee or advisor of kids in the accelerator program. What should I be looking for in the next Ash when I do something? I think they have one in the fall of this year in New York.
Yeah, I think everybody has biased answers here. I think and funnily enough, we're thinking about hiring right now. So I've been thinking a lot about what am I looking for when I think about this early archetype of people. And I've landed on a very different sort of demographic than what I was originally thinking. Like it's very glamorous to think I'm going to hire this guy that maybe worked at Google for a couple of years or Amazon. And then maybe they went and worked at a Uniswap or a Coinbase or a bigger company. And those are extremely talented people. But I think at the early stage, especially for the stage of like the accelerator and other things, you want people that just prove they can hustle and put in the work. I think very often, especially with software engineering, the current grind or the meta is sort of like leak code every day, go and do a couple of these like interviews, and then bam, you land your kind of big tech internship. A lot of people go down that path and it's very difficult and it's a different skill set. But I think you want to look for the kids that are like doing these random side projects or these hackathons. And I think now more than ever, especially in crypto, you're seeing a lot of these, like even if they fail like every single time, or maybe they're getting second or third, they're not winning. They just have this kind of fire in them. And I'm a big believer on in the span of like 5 seconds or 10 seconds, like it really is like that fast of just talking to someone, you can sense that hustle and that fire and that energy. And I think that's just informing so much of the people that I like to be around.
That ambition is huge. And, I'm going to attest to the fact that's the same thing I told Mahesh when I first met him. I was like, wow, here's a kid who's super smart. He's not really a kid compared to you, but he's, he's super smart, well experienced, but the fire he has, the ambition he has, in the past he could have chosen. And yet he's doing what he's doing because he has this massive ambition. That's a huge thing. And it's not easy to figure out and see on a piece of paper. So I think your advice to me is when I do this for A16, look for kids or look for people who are super ambitious.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. That reminds me of my favorite Chris Dixonism, which is that what the smartest people in the world are doing on weekends as their hobbies is what everyone else will be doing during the week 10 years forward. And that's the vibes I got when I met Ash for the first time. But Ash, I have to ask you, man, you raised the accelerator money, you maybe fell out with a couple of your friends on the back of all of this. Why not just go back to studying and, do the Harvard thing, get the summer job, go make a fair amount of money in a comfortable lifetime? Like, what made you want to keep building even after the experience that you went through?
Before you answer that question, I went to school across the river at Harvard Business School, and there were plenty of people who dropped out to go start something. And a lot of them did come back to finish up. So even though they were like part of my year originally, they actually graduated 4 or 5 years later at Harvard Business School because they did come back. So what gave you that incentive or that drive to like, let's do it now and let's not give up?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you the story. And I think this is like a very defining sort of moment for me. I just kind of returned to my roots. Like I thought about like at truly first principles, what do I care about and what do I value? Let me see if I have it here. I just remember on that flight back from the accelerator, I made a note called like Plane Reflections or something, where I just wrote down these sort of convictions. One sec.
Awesome.
I want to share this. This is written on the plane ride back from the accelerator. I think I just wrote reflections. The first line, what is my goal? Build a company that helps change the world. What does that involve? Building intelligent crypto workflows for companies that streamline manual, complex, and repetitive tasks. And that was sort of the language and phrasing that we were using at the time. And I really just like went through first principles when I go top to bottom, like my convictions, what do I want to do? Where do my skill sets sort of align? And this is like it's like 5-6 hour flight. I remember I have one song on repeat, like listening to it. I was sitting in front of this note, just like trying to like truly reflect. And I think despite all the pain, like this is literally just like a week or two after I knew that I was going to be at this alone. I remember we spoke to one partner in particular at the A16Z Accelerator, Cara, who's actually another Harvard alum. And she was just talking about like, yeah, being a solo founder is tough. And there's like a lot that you have to go through. I just remember on this plane ride thinking about that, thinking about all the previous experiences. Do I still want to do this? Do I think there's still runway here? And the resounding answer at the end was like this this weird feeling of confidence despite having nothing at face. Like we didn't really have a product like truly built out. I didn't really have a team, but it was this feeling of like, I know I want to give this a go. And there was another moment at the Accelerator I remember from Brian Armstrong. He came in like week 2 or something, and he had this quote or this anecdote from when he was doing YC. It was him and another founder, and they were both, the times were tough. They were struggling, and they were like, I'm going to set a calendar reminder for 2 years from today. And you and I both can't give up for the next 2 years. Otherwise, 2 years. Otherwise, the other guy's got to like buy us a bottle of wine or something, or like they just got to like spend a shit ton of money on some gift, whatever it might be. And that also stuck in my head when I think about how much more runway can I give this. But yeah, I think the overall feeling here is like, if you feel like there's still stuff that you can do, keep going.
Well, I could already tell from the stuff you were saying, you're a very mature person and you have certain qualities that are required to be a successful entrepreneur, in my opinion. You know, the fact that you do reflect, and younger folks usually don't reflect. You know, I remember when I was at HBS, the person that made the most sense when they came in to speak, as Mahesh could tell you, there's so many great speakers that come to talk at HBS, was a gentleman by the name back then in the 90s, Jack Welch, who was revered as one of the best CEOs ever. And the thing and I don't know, Ash, were you at the Harvard blockchain conference when I gave the speech? So
yeah, I think I was
were, 2 years ago, you know, I was honored to be asked, as an alumni to come and give that intro. But the thing he said, I'll never forget, you know, someone in my vintage at HBS said, what is the most important thing you do every single day or something? And he said, is the 10 minutes I reflect before I go to bed. And basically you're already making reflection a process, because in this dopamine induced, highly triggered social media world, we're all just relying on a sympathetic nervous system and never freaking doing and sitting back and letting the brain digest and think. You're already doing that. So that's huge.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely lots to do and longer path ahead. I think especially now, and we'll dive into Axal, but there's like, if back then was chaotic, now is like chaotic times 10 or times 100, just a whole different level.
All right, let's get into Axal. Tell me about Axal. And, you know, there's a lot of AI projects, and a lot of other crypto-like projects. What makes it different? Well, maybe describe a little bit for the audience what it is, and then what's different about it.
Yeah. I think the way that I describe this to my friends or to my mom is, when you think about the future that we want to live in, whether like crypto, outside of crypto, just whatever it is, we want to live in a world that has guarantees for tasks that we fulfill. Like we want to live in a world where the gap between my intent and the outcome of that intent is frictionless. And I think over time, we've seen that evolution. Like obviously the printing press with like getting information to everybody on this planet, the internet, now LLMs, like truly making that gap between like knowledge and just some request for knowledge zero. And I think when you look at tasks, like actually going and like fulfilling an action, we haven't really seen that development as strongly. Like today, you still have to be a developer to do a lot of things on the software side. Or if you're not a developer, maybe you're doing like a lot of super manual tasks. And I think for Axal, like I said, we started off with just treasury management, our focus on automating that just from our own pain points, managing 10K in hackathon winnings out of like a Discord server and a Gnosis safe. It was like super chaotic. Like Ash is allowed to spend this much on coffee or like this much on travel, that kind of thing. And throughout the Accelerator, and especially now, we've kind of broadened that scope towards what if we can create a future leveraging blockchains and the verifiability guarantees that you get through this technology to really eliminate all friction between some requests and some tasks. So the sort of phrase that we've been using a lot now has been Axal is a network for verifiable autonomous agents. And I think when you picture this, like tangibly, what we built out for the V1 is a Zapier style interface, like a drag and drop, like widget style interface where you choose a task, you can connect it to another task and connect it to another. So I could say something like monitor John's wallet for all incoming or outgoing transactions above $100 and send him a text with that. You can take that to another level where it might be like, monitor your portfolio for TVL. And if it goes below a certain level, maybe immediately cash out, like rebalance to USDC or something. The use cases go far beyond DeFi as well. Like if you think about so much of what's happening right now with stable coins and the usage of just blockchains as payment rails around the world, the interface today is still way too difficult. When you look at somebody who's maybe living in Venezuela or in India, where they're worried about rebalancing between a native currency and something that's a bit more stable, like the USDC, the interfaces here are still crazy. Like you got to go to some really specific app. You have to follow the news, observe what's going on, and then maybe make a trade after that. I think the dream for me, and we're working on this right now, is natural language, like just typing something in or saying something, compiling straight to a series of tasks. And then just to your point of agents, without getting too deep on the technical side of things, I think what excites me a lot, and Harvard did a pretty good job on that when I think about like econ and just learning about markets at a high level. What really excites me is competitive free markets for any task on this planet. Like this is anything that people can fulfill, that humans can fulfill, whether it's like buying coffee or what you see today in crypto with like a cross for bridging or Uniswap X for like fulfilling swap orders. Any task that can be fulfilled that is verifiable, you can have a competitive market for that. And I think that unleashes the best of sort of humanity. Like you have any request that can be fulfilled for a certain price. And I think when you look at a lot of these AI agent companies today, they're really focused on like, let's just plug in an LLM, see what it does, and then take that output. I think in an AI driven future, in an agent driven future, we really need guarantees and we need such generalizability for the tasks. Like you don't want to trust a probabilistic model. You want to leverage it for what it's good at, but you want to have safe guardrails and stop losses for what it might do. So I think our kind of niche and wedge, and I'd say real differentiator is verifiability for these agents and building the infra for that.
Verifiable autonomous agents are huge. And that's a really good intersection between AI and blockchain. I mean, one thing blockchain can do for AI is that integrity of data and models and inferences. So that is a great intersection there. What are the other verticals? I mean, again, like I think it's smart to focus on one area first and get expertise and really build it out. But have you thought of other verticals that ultimately your platform could be good for as well?
Yeah. I mean, if we're all being real, like what is the main driver of value for crypto today? Almost entirely, let's say like DeFi plus stablecoins. And I think very different demographics. Like we were just touching on kind of like a dream use case for Axal when we think about just like for the masses, this intuitive platform. Going off of that, like one thing that you've seen a lot of success with today, not even for like a consumer kind of or like crypto native kind of folks, these Telegram bots are being used by everyone, like all over the place. You got people like living all over, even outside of the US. And when you look at the interface, like first of all, stats wise, these things are doing amazing. Like top, like I think it's like third DApp by volume or like actual crypto use case kind of by volume is like Unibot or BananaBot or one of these. And when you look at the interface, it's still like click a few buttons for like basic limit order or basic swap. And I think what we want to do as an immediate product built on top of Axal's infra is more custom strategies that leverage these agents. So no longer is it like, I want to use Unibot and I click on this button and I'm going to buy Bitcoin the second it goes below a certain level. It could be like, you just type in like, I want to copy trade this guy, or I want to only buy Bitcoin if it falls below this level and my current wallet balance in USD is above a certain level. Like now we're getting much more tangible. It's like people thinking about their finances and like their ability to speculate or invest based off of other conditions. So I think that's like an interesting intersection of DeFi and the others. During our closed beta for the V1, we were exploring all over the place. If you think about the future of gaming and social, which are two areas that are going to expand a lot for crypto going forward, think about how user engagement is done today, like airdrops or just generally like campaigns and rewards. A really exciting feature is what if we can deeply customize those experiences while having it still be fully automated? So I'll give an example. One company that we're talking with, they want to reward brand new users. So the first time a wallet or an address interacts with their platform, could be buying an NFT, could be buying like a starship in their game, whatever it might be. They want to airdrop them an asset, but they want to airdrop an asset that's informed by the rest of their on-chain history. Like what other games did this guy play? Or for one company in particular that's focused on like sports, it might be like, what other soccer players does this guy really like? Or what other soccer NFTs do they have? And we can customize that engagement based off that. And when you break it down, the beauty of crypto is that whether it's a game or a DeFi platform, you have this really composable standard for data. Everything is an NFT or an ERC20 or some transaction hash that you can go and unpack. So I think the possibility for deeply custom engagement, leveraging these agents and these automation solutions gets pretty powerful. And I won't talk about off-chain, but I think the ZK-TLS stuff that you might be seeing around now gets super exciting.
What I'm hearing underneath here, Ash, which is super impressive, is you really have a good UI, UX view and a product view of things. You know, Ava Labs, we're like over 250 people, mostly engineers. There's got a strong computer science team and background. The founder was a distributed systems professor at Cornell. He did his undergraduate computer science at Princeton. We've got a gazillion. So actually, here's a question. Obviously, we have a lot of Cornell computer scientists, and it's really hardcore engineering. We've got MIT kids. We've got Stanford computer scientists. They're all hardcore engineers. Carnegie Mellon. We have a University of Illinois. They're all hardcore engineering. You were a computer scientist at Harvard undergrad. Is there a difference in terms of what they teach there, et cetera, that is a little bit different from like the Stanfords, Berkeley's, MIT's, Cornell, or Carnegie Mellon type of computer science?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The fact that you at such a young age is so UI, UX, usability, product focus, as opposed to engineering, create some giant open source platform and build it and they will come. That's very mature. Again, very mature. This consistent theme I've seen in you is maturity for a person at a young age.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think there's like a lot of just randomness here, but funnily enough, like from the teaching side of things, when you think about like like I'm sitting in my class, like CS 50, which is like the super famous like intro CS class that Harvard does. First time I ever like wrote code. Like, as I said, I was a super like debate nerd, not technical at all, kind of guy in high school. And I just fell in love with it. And I think the reason why I fell in love with it was because of how product focused it was. Like the final project, again, this is like these kids who have only been coding in Python for 2 or 3 weeks. And then they all of a sudden, like your final project, you have to make something real, like a web app that we're going to have a little like science fair kind of vibes. Like everyone's walking down the hallways and you have to go demo it. And I remember for me, it's like, I loved like StockX and buying like these cool shoes. Like that was just what I wanted to do, and building a bot that's like automatically like checking price feeds for one thing that I was trying to do, like a real problem in my life that I could suddenly use this like superpower to go and build. So I think that just from the get-go, Harvard CS does a really good job. Unfortunately, I think when you get older, it gets a little bit more theoretical. I think the stereotype is like Harvard super theoretical, Stanford's a bit more applied when you get to like grad school or like higher levels of it. But I think the beauty of Harvard, as I'm sure you guys saw at HBS, and I've been lucky enough to take a couple entrepreneurship classes over there, you have a lot of crossover with other things. Like even just thinking about my roommates, like one guy is a Latin major who's doing his PhD in Latin at Princeton, like best in the fucking like country at that. Another guy, econ major, another guy doing pre-med stuff. I think when you're like in an environment like that versus let's say a Berkeley where there's nothing wrong with this, but like your friend group is probably mostly CS or other folks thinking about startups. I think you're forced to have a lot of super interesting conversations that frankly, like even 5 or 10 years down the line, you don't know what that's going to result in.
I always observe that one of the things that I am consistently impressed with and I love out of the Harvard undergrad community is like there's a violent focus on entrepreneurship. And I don't mean entrepreneurship in like the venture capital raise money sense. Like I think about entrepreneurship in terms of this idea of you are creating a lot more than you should be able to with the resources you have. You're taught this concept at HBS of the entrepreneurial gap, which is that like people that are exceptional at entrepreneurship are really people at the end of the day that can take the resources that are given to them and significantly outperform what the average person would be able to do with those resources. And I think that's a trait that comes out of people out of Harvard College on a consistent basis. And, you know, the other side of it is just creativity. I think y'all think really outside the box and come up with some pretty interesting ideas. And candidly, that's why, you know, I see a lot of founders out of Harvard College doing things in crypto, doing things in neurotech, doing things in like some of the weird areas of the world, taking massive risks because, you know, you have this underlying sense because you've spent so much time with smart people in different disciplines that you'll figure it out. With that, you know, man, I'd love to talk about maybe some of the token and complex side of Axal as well, because, you know, you've launched this platform already. You have clearly thought a lot about the product. What does the token do? How do you think about how you're using the token within the context of the supply and the demand side of the network?
Yeah, I think this is an area where crypto's kind of gotten a pretty bad like rap over the past couple of years when you think about like a lack of utility for a token or like a strong like need for this. I think for something like Axal, what we're trying to do, when you think about like a world with these free markets for every possible task, like you have agents that can fulfill a lot of different needs. I think for us, when we think about the utility of a token, the goal is to incentivize these agents to go and fulfill these tasks. And it's also to make it super easy for users to go and submit a request in, let's say, one native token or one form of token, and then not worry about all the complexities with the different chains, different assets that you have to swap between, whatever it might be. So I think clearly on the supply side, what this looks like in the near term is us leveraging the token to help bootstrap and subsidize suppliers. So today, when you look at Uniswap X or Across, which are these two guiding light protocols, when I think about like intents and agents in production, what they've done is they have pretty confined groups. You have Wintermute, which is a massive market maker kind of fund, and then a couple other groups that go and do it. For us, we might try to leverage our connections with them in addition to just other folks by having the native token be something that subsidizes costs. So instead of a user paying $100, let's say, for a system to go through, now they're only paying like 10 or something. And on the demand side, I think as well, just making it super easy for people to have guarantees. Like a key part of this working is slashing. So basically these agents, these people that you're trusting to go and do these tasks for you, we want to make sure that they have collateral locked in Axal and they have buy-in in Axal when they go and fulfill these tasks. Like if Mahesh's job is to go and like make a swap on behalf of Ash, I don't want to give you your reward or your payment that we've agreed on until I verify that you've done that. And in the world where you don't do it, great. Axal is going to help find a different agent, like somebody other than you. Let's say maybe it's John who goes and does it next, but we want to make sure that you are slashed and informing the public and users of that kind of data. So I think a native token has pretty strong utility when I think about verification buy-in and solver buy-in.
How do you think about getting it into the hands of the right people? Because there's obviously this supply side incentivization mechanism. There's also the idea of speculators that'll hold your token maybe for price go up. Like over a medium to long term period, how do you expect that ecosystem and token economy itself to settle? And where do you really see the tokens ending up, in whose hands?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting like world and rollout. I feel like the people that will hold Axal are people that see a clear like piece of value that you can add to the network. And there's a lot of different aspects. Like number one is you're just a user. Like you're somebody that either adapt or like some guy that's doing trades frequently or some dude who wants to rebalance or a game that wants to reward their users. You're a user that cares deeply about leveraging these agents because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better than you doing this in-house or you using some other source. On the flip side, there are a couple other roles. Obviously, the role of verification. So the people that are checking that these agents did these tasks correctly. What we've done here is incentivize them to call people out when they haven't fulfilled a task. So heavily inspired by what Uma is doing with optimistic verification, at least in the near term. Basically, we have a little dispute window, like 3 to 4 hours, where somebody can call out an agent for not fulfilling a task correctly. And then you earn a piece of a reward, piece of that stake that a solver has. And of course, the solvers themselves, I think that they will be massive holders. So interesting demographic, especially as we think about use cases. You'll obviously have maybe more folks today that are holding most tokens, which might be more the VC, the fund, the like trading kind of types, or the people that are trying to speculate. But now we've turned that into like they are adding value to Axal by fulfilling these tasks that are relative to what they're already doing. And on the flip side, you might have consumers, you might have like regular people that just love using the platform. So we'll see how it plays out.
Where do you see Axal and crypto going, over the next 5 years? The space is obviously evolving so much. The role of AI within it is evolving pretty rapidly as well. Love it if you could just kind of set the stage for how you think the next 5 years of this goes and your role in it.
I think I was getting coffee with a guy right before this, and we spent a lot of time talking about like the next iteration of crypto. Like back in 2020, the next iteration is like DeFi and like seeing that this thing can work out. I think now we're at a point where we need to see like mass adoption at a truly global scale. And it's cheesy and you hear the phrase all the time, but I think we have a couple good data points. Poly market with prediction markets, stable coins in general, and like just payment rails being proven out. I know Vitalik was tweeting about this, I think the other day too. When I think about Axal's role in like agents, in 5 years, I want Axal to be a dominant source of order flow for blockchains. And by order flow, I mean like incoming tasks are just far easier to fulfill through an Axal versus building a custom tool yourself. Like literally picture what Google has been able to do for search over the past like 10 or 15 years. They have become the de facto entry point for you to access information. What we want to do is become the de facto entry point for people to get tasks done on chain, because you can immediately tap into this pretty liquid market with good fees and execution guarantees of agents to fulfill tasks. And I think when we think about more real world things, like obviously with Poly market, you can be betting on the election, or with stable coins, you don't really care about crypto. You're just going and like finding a stable asset that you can invest in. I think for Axal with tasks, it's the same thing. Like you don't have to be thinking about the rails under the hood. You just know that you want to do this specific strategy, or you're in your banking app on your phone. Maybe Axal's embedded with that under the hood, and you want to just go and make sure that your portfolio is doing what you've expected. I think like deeply custom solutions leveraging something like Axal are what we want to do, where you've masked all of the inner workings under the hood.
What kind of advice do you have to, I don't know, the junior or a sophomore at college right now and who wants to do this? What should he do? What should he be thinking about?
Yeah, this might be a little, there are more blunt ways to put this. And I think I'm really speaking to like people like me. Like maybe you grew up, you're a little bit of like kind of in your own shell, not the most outgoing, maybe going down the trodden path. And I think especially at a place like Harvard, you see a lot of kids like that. I think the strong advice I would give people is like, get out of your comfort zone by any means necessary. Like it could be something where you're, let's say, first day at school, like freshman year, like you don't know who to talk to, or like you're unsure what club to join, but you have a little inkling of like, I might be excited about this, or I might want to explore this path. There are two worlds, like you explore that option or you don't. In the world where you explore that option, who knows what can happen? Like for me, if you ask me freshman year, like my first day of school, what would I be doing in 4 years? Not at all this, like zero chance I could have predicted this or known that things would have come here. I'm so grateful for like the little risks and decision-making along the way. The alternative is like, and I saw a little glimpse of this. I worked at AWS one summer, kind of going down the usual software engineering, good CS student kind of path. And it was fun, like fun technical problems. Like I'm writing code, but my impact on the world was like designing call center software. And I think the problem with kind of going down the trodden path, whether it's like sort of finance, I'm rooming with an investment banker right now and he's a great dude, but kind of that path versus like going down the CS path, there's a lot out of your control. I think when you're young and in college, there's so much that you can try out and you have a lot of flexibility, and a lot of people are just going to talk to you and take risks that, especially earlier in your career, you should take more risks. And I think a lot of people invert that. They think like, when you're early on, you got to like follow the path and think through what people advised you. And then you end up 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, doing something that you realize you maybe don't want to do. And the Accelerator was an interesting representation of this. We were by far the youngest, like 19, 20 years old. Everybody else was like 30 to 35, ex-Google, ex-Airbnb. They kind of went down that path and they realized they wanted to do their own thing. So I think the world is changing and you're seeing a lot more people trying their own thing. The advice I would say is just go and try that thing out, see what can happen.
Well, let's compare and contrast you to your investment banker roommate. And Mahesh can, who's gone through both paths, can actually answer this question too. Unfortunately, and correct me if I'm wrong, and a lot of young people work for me. So the way I see it now, it's almost you have to decide freshman year. Like if you don't go into the right business club, finance club, consulting club, you're not going to get the right internships during the summer. And then you're not going to get hired for a full-time banking job, which means you won't get hired for the right private equity firm. So if you don't decide as a freshman year, you won't get into that club, which won't get you that interview, which won't get you to the bank, that will get you to the private equity firm. So it's kind of like counter to what college was supposed to be, which is go and do healthy exploration and discovery and figure out what life is about and what you really want to do. It's almost as you have to come in freshman year with conviction of one path or the other when it's not fair to ask that young, smart kid that, right? So like, if you don't decide that you want to be an entrepreneur, or it's more like if you don't decide you want to be a consultant or investment banking by sophomore year, you're kind of like really out of that game.
Yeah, that lines up. I'm curious what it was like when Mahesh was in undergrad, but definitely lines up with like what we've been seeing. Like this guy, right now he's a banker too, and he already graduated. I know he started private equity recruiting like before he even started his job, and he never even interned at this bank before,
within 6 months of your banking job, and it's even worse because I can tell you, I know these kids. Whatever internship you get after the club, from being in the club at Harvard undergrad or other colleges, dictates which banks you go to. And then whichever bank you go to will dictate which private equities recruit. And within 6 months of that banking job, you will be guaranteed a spot for that private equity firm a year and a half from then. So this is, in a weird way, I think this is horrible for young kids. Like there are great things that you can learn in banking, and that will provide you excellence to be an entrepreneur later on. I mean, I think let's not get lost here. Like you still have to make profitable companies as an entrepreneur at some point. And financials, people who go to Goldman Sachs and learn how to read financial statements, they have an edge in a different way and they look at a business in a different way. Even if you go to strategy consulting, McKinsey, BCG, whatever, Bain, you get a different perspective as well. And that's also helpful to the entrepreneurial journey. It's a long life. So I don't know how kids do it today because it's almost like they're forced to make a decision really early.
Yeah, they those banks, look, I think a lot of people give them a bad rap and a bad name, but they really train you to think. And, people go in there and they complain about the hours, they complain about the culture, but that's kind of what it teaches you at the end of the day. It's a very different kind of discipline that ties together with the way of seeing the world that has produced results for over 75 years. And I think the process and structure that something like banking and private equity teaches you is invaluable in so many ways beyond just the business skill set. Like, sure, knowing how to read the financial statements, massively, massively important, especially if you're running out trying to be a 28-year-old crypto investor like me. The other side of it is like you learn marketing, you learn how to sell a company, you learn how to even approach a meeting with someone who is a billionaire and like can do whatever he wants and has complete control over every aspect of his life, but you know how to approach that meeting and act the right way. Like there are all these soft skills that I think, have for the longest time existed within these institutions and have been passed down. And I mean, Harvard just does this in a different way, right? It's institutionalized knowledge. And I think it's a travesty that people are starting to see these as fundamentally antagonistic. But, the other side of this, John, is like, it just goes to the fact that like the age at which people are able to produce is getting earlier and earlier. And a lot of that is social media. You have like 13-year-olds that go viral on TikTok and suddenly they have $1 million in their pocket and they're buying their mom a house. And I think the result of that is, kids feel earlier and earlier they need to start producing. And maybe that explains a little bit of why banking moves backwards, but you need that certainty as early as possible if you're going to be that exceptional figure in the world that everyone wants to be today. And, I think the banking private equity path is one way to get there. I think the other way is to be like someone like Ash, who's just relentless. I mean, the number of times he's like had to just go through the shit and figure it out. Like, it's a really interesting one. And, this was going to get to my last question, Ash, or maybe we have a couple more, but one of my last questions, which was, I'd love it if you could tell a little bit about what happened with your best friend. And if you could answer this question of like, do you think starting a business with your best friend is a good idea?
Yeah, and that's a tough topic. I think I'm a little bit on the no side here, obviously biased by personal experience. There's actually a couple of examples here, like the guys that I did the accelerator with, but even before that, like one of my best friends, the first guy that I met at Harvard, quite frankly, smartest person I know. And I think I was talking to the Hesh about him the other day for an unrelated reason, but like smartest person I know, best at CS, best at math, like just a very smart brain, and he knows what goes on. I've never argued with someone as much as like my brother, and then him in a close second place. Like still my best friend, but the conversations that you have, the way that you approach life, it's just a very different skill set. And I think, especially as he's kind of gone down the more like theoretical, like kind of way above my like level when I think about CS or math kind of route, and I've gone down the entrepreneurship route, you really start to see that like those ways of viewing the world can sometimes come into conflict a decent amount, like risk averseness at times, or like focused on the theoretical versus like the practical. And I think these are skills that everything being balanced is important, but it can get tough. And I think just talking about the accelerator a little bit, with these guys in particular, it's tough when you have a relationship that's mostly like things are fun and you guys are side by side and in it together. And at first glance, you would think like startups and entrepreneurship, there's no better way to do that. Like co-found something with your friend and you guys are both like fully bought in and doing this thing. But I think when times get tough, you really start to see like what people can take, and not even saying that in like a negative sense, but like what people want to do. For one of the guys that I did it with, it just kind of brought out the worst side of him when you think about like not contributing or just going through the rough with your friends. It's more like, I'm just going to save myself and see what can happen. And I think that was really one of the lower points. And for the other guy, I'm actually rooming with him here as well. He's my third roommate. He's just working at a later stage startup right now. But for him, it was just this realization that like crypto maybe isn't for him. And like the sheer complexity and roller coaster of a startup, especially early on, is just too much to handle. So I think I'm slightly on the no side, just biased by my past experiences. But if you don't want to kind of taint that relationship, which is very possible to do, you should just be careful when you're thinking about it.
Yeah, you never know how someone works until you work with them. I went through a similar process, although mine turned out more positively. Sal and I were really good friends at Goldman, and something resembling best friends for a couple of years up to starting EP3. And I think Ash gives a lot of perspective. That's awesome. I want to give the other side of that, which is there's a level of trust that comes from working with your best friend, and that comes from working with someone that you've known for a number of years, that knows how to do his job exceptionally. Because in these kinds of frameworks, the job itself is like blocking and tackling and fixing things as they come up. There is no job itself. So having that trust that someone can figure that out and do that, I think, is one of the most invaluable things. I think you have to really upfront set the rules, set the lay of the lands, give a really good sense of what responsibilities look like. And if you don't do that work up front, it could really come back and bite you. And, I'm so lucky at the end of the day that I have a co-founder that is way smarter than me, way harder working, and just brings absolutely everything he has to everything he does. And, when you have people like that, it's very easy to work with them, because when times get tough, they buckle up and they get strapped in for the ride. And, it's been awesome to see that in my case. Just to take the other side of that, working with your best friend can be really hard, but it can also be really, really rewarding if it goes the other way. So with that, Ash, we would love to maybe do a little lightning round.
Yeah, I get to start here, Ash. You ready? So basically, I'll say something, the first thing that comes to your mind. Keep it short so we can get to the next one. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Vitalik.
Biased by recency, but like real world uses of crypto, like hates DeFi. I don't know, some level of that. Past 2 days.
A16Z.
Fundamentals. I think we ran through the accelerator, and it really was like learning crypto from scratch, getting through this. And I think I wish I kind of leveraged them a bit more, but back at that time, like every week learning about some new topic in crypto, just amazing.
BitTensor.
Let's see. Speculation. That's the first word that comes to mind a little bit. I think it's exciting, and what they're doing with these different tasks that can be done for different things. And I think at ED3, somebody might have talked at the conference that those guys did, somebody might have talked about it a bit more, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I think crypto's getting a little bit of hype, maybe unwarranted around there.
Sammy had a great slide at the conference where he did a talk on like what is BitTensor, and like there was a glowing quote from the founder. There was like a quote from an AI researcher, like revolutionary, will change the way the world thinks. And then the third quote was just nonsense, Kyle Samani. I thought it was fucking hilarious. Maybe to move on to a couple more lightning round topics. How about Harvard College?
Charles River. I don't know why. It's the first thing that comes to mind. I think the best part of my life was just like, I don't know if you guys know the iLabs. Like every day senior year, I would just wake up from Lev, my dorm, bridge right in front of me, cross the bridge, walk through the gorgeous campus of HBS, get to the iLabs and work there. I think that environment's very different from New York, but gorgeous. Yeah.
Lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming. Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think of is prophetic, or this like company that's doing that stuff. My brother talks about it all the time. I think they might have some controversy that they're embroiled in right now, but definitely an exciting area. Yeah, lots of stuff on neuro. I think if I were doing stuff in crypto, I might jump ship and go help him out on that side of stuff, but very interesting.
Last one, Kamala Harris.
Oh boy. I don't know if there's a good answer here. I think I will just say, like, from my perspective, when I think about like politics and like the engagement that like people in general should have with industries, we want to encourage like adoption and usage as much as we can within reason. I think the problem with a lot of what we've seen on that side of things is like a lack of clarity. I think yesterday or 2 days ago, OpenSea got a Wells notice, and I think this administration and like that side of things has just been like a little not getting their shit together. I think there are issues on every kind of side, but yeah.
John, do you have any others you want to go through, or are we good?
No, I just want to say thanks, Ash. It's always a pleasure seeing the future entrepreneurial stars of this country, and also of this, of a university that I care about. And I think you have a lot of the attributes, from being naturally competitive, the high ambition level you have, the resourcefulness you have, all of that, and the maturity. That's actually super important. I think my takeaway for all of this is young entrepreneurs have to be real with themselves. They may be brilliant geniuses, but if they don't have the maturity and willing to like take the ups and downs, and also understand how to communicate with a lot of people a lot older, it's going to be very hard for them. And you seem to have that maturity, and you're already reflecting on what you want to do, what you've done, and where you want to go in the short and long term. So if anyone's going to be successful, it's you. And I wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it means a lot to hear from you.
I don't think I could have put that so eloquently. So maybe I'll leave it at that. Last thing, guys, where can we find you on social media, or more broadly, if the audience is trying to learn more? Maybe start with Ash.
Yeah, Axal, this is actually the first purchase that I made as soon as we got funding. I bought the domain name ax.al. So literally just a company name. I didn't even know you could get .al as the ending, but ax.al, just Axal. On Twitter, I think it's get Axal. Same thing for other things, but working on the presence there. I think, especially on the recruiting side, we're fully focused on hiring. So anybody that has listened to this and gets super excited about the thought of getting in at the ground level of a super big vision and maybe moving away from the risky kind of path, or the more risk averse kind of path, I would love to chat. But yeah, just ax.al.
Says everything that the man shilled his company and didn't even mention himself. John, anywhere people can find you?
Sure. On X or Twitter, it's at John, the number one, Woo, or john@avalabs.org is where you can email me.
Perfect. Guys, well, thank you so much for another awesome episode of Proof of Coverage. It was great to have you on, Ash. And John, looking forward to having you co-host more episodes as well. With that, guys, let's wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Proof of Coverage podcast. We post new episodes Mondays and Wednesdays, interviewing the best DePIN and crypto founders out there. If you like this episode, follow us on Twitter @CoverageProved, and all other platforms, including YouTube and Spotify, at Proof of Coverage Podcast. Thank you.